Seriously, I do not look like Stanley from The Office.
The Office is probably one of my favorite sitcoms, and I know this isn't particularly an interesting or original take, but I just love this show. I think it's funny, especially during its golden era. It's no secret that The Office is mainstream, it's popular.
Make it stop!
I'm the type of person that is picky about sitcoms because of the format and jokes and setup. Most of the time, the traditional sitcom format is filmed very similar, has audience laugh track in the background, and the plot setup can be a little formulaic. My point is that some sitcoms are just not for me. I'm not the biggest fan of them. That's why I was always hesitant about getting into The Office, but when I did, I realized it was a lot different than other sitcoms that I had watched, and I think it's because of the mockumentary style that definitely helped. I hadn't really seen any other sitcoms really filmed in this format, and the writing structure was a little bit different than I had seen from other sitcoms. I didn't watch the show when it first came out, but I got into it years later and have rewatched it a few times, and there are a lot of things I notice every time I rewatch this show, and the same questions usually come up. Where does it start to fall apart? When do the cracks start to show? When do the characters start to act unlikable? This is something that I've paid close attention to during my rewatch of the show, so I have opinions about where the peak was, where the cracks started, and where it started to decay, and when the rot completely just took over. I think it would be easiest to dedicate a video to each season so I can put my deepest thoughts into this retrospective, and my thoughts on all the characters and how they change over time. Season 1 of The Office, at least the first episode, follows the format of the first episode of the UK version of The Office, and the show quickly starts to become its own thing. When I see a lot of The Office criticism of season 1, a lot of people don't look too highly of it because it's more tame and some people find it boring, and I do agree that it could be a little bit drier, but I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing for the show. The show is meant to focus on the daily goings-on of office workers, and the laid-back nature of season 1 gives it more realism. Things aren't really that zany as much in season 1. Maybe the most zany is the stapler and the jello gag, or when Dwight hides out in a box in the warehouse. But compared to this, it's very tame. And honestly, it surprises me how wacky the show becomes to the point where it doesn't even feel like the same show. Season 1 establishes our main players, the ones that would get the most screen time of the entire office, at least for now. We have the boss, Michael Scott, middle-aged, ignorant, immature, and childish. And this immediately makes for the setup of the show. The foundation, really. Because the appeal of the show is the ignorant boss that's desperate for attention and praise from those around him. And what really adds to the charm of this character is Steve Carell. I genuinely believe that no one else could play this role. He really just gives off this look of a boss trying to liven up the office with his jokes and impressions, and doesn't really read into the fact that most of his co-workers don't really care for his attempts at humor.
What? $6 million man!
That's why I have an appreciation for season 1, even though the show definitely develops more of an identity in seasons 2 through 5. Episode 1 is introducing us to the dynamics of the characters, like Michael to the other employees, Jim and Pam, Jim and Dwight, Ryan and Michael, kind of everything that you need to know about the characters. We also see the other extras and the characters that I guess were laid off because we don't see them really after episode 1. It's kind of funny to look back on episode 1 and see all these people and we're just like, who are they? The first episode is very scaled back, really focusing mostly on Michael's interactions with everybody else. We'll also get moments of the other characters interacting to establish the dynamics between each other, but the real star is Michael, who loves the camera crew. It's established pretty early on that Jim is a level-headed, calm for the most part, but can also be childish type of person, often messing around with Dwight. Most of the time he's just trying to get through the mediocrity of his work. He seems to be aware that his skill set is better than what he's currently doing at Dunder Mifflin.
I'm boring myself just talking about this.
He's thought somewhat where he wants to go in life, but ultimately stayed stagnant, having a crush on the receptionist Pam, who's engaged to a warehouse worker named Roy. Although it's clear, even from the first episode, that Jim is interested in Pam, the development of the relationship is equally interesting as it is infuriating for multiple reasons that will become obvious in the next seasons. As for season 1, it's clear that Jim and Pam are friends, the closest ones at the office. He goes up to the receptionist desk to talk to Pam because she's the only one that really entertains him. We do see moments from the season that indicate that Pam is unconsciously interested in Jim, the way she cheers for him during the basketball game or stares at him.
Jim said mixed berries? Oh, wow. Yeah, he's on to me.
The boundaries between Jim and Pam are clear when they talk about weekend plans, and it's clear that they only can really interact with each other during work. They can't really hang out outside of work alone because obviously Roy would kill Jim, so it's clear that the relationship is limited to the office and will become more of a barrier as their feelings for each other become more clear in seasons 2 and 3. In episode 6 of season 1, Katie, a character that Jim ends up dating for a brief amount of time, is introduced, and this is the first time that we really start to see Pam's jealousy of another woman's relationship with Jim. Pam is also just an average office worker that just wants to get through the day. It seems like she and Jim are both really not fulfilled with their work. Her being a secretary, it's relatively a manageable job and also very repetitive, and soon can feel very boring.
I don't think it's many little girls' dream to be a receptionist.
Pam doesn't really question her role as a secretary and what that means to her until later. Her focus is more on trying to make this relationship with Roy work, when he clearly doesn't really want to make the relationship work. She knows that her relationship with Roy isn't what she wants it to be, but because she's already invested so much time into a relationship, she's afraid to end it, and she's also afraid of change. And I also think that's what hinders her relationship with Jim. Dwight is your typical do-gooder, over-exaggerated obviously for comedic effect. He doesn't like to break the rules or go outside the norm, which is why Jim triggers him so much. He's a hard worker and has to be the best at sales. He's a suck-up to Michael, the one that has to report Jim whenever he does something bad. It becomes pretty comical when Dwight, who grew up on a farm and is the most comical version of someone with that mentality, that a person's immune system is their form of healthcare and that they should just let their body heal itself. So when Dwight is put in charge of distributing a healthcare plan, he starts having people disclose their ailments, and this is where Jim and Pam start writing fake illnesses and Dwight comically starts calling out people's actual health problems to the entire room.
Anal fissures.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, but no one here has it.
Someone has it.
When Jim pranks Dwight and makes him think they're in an alliance, Jim makes Dwight go to hide in a box in the warehouse, and then when Roy catches Pam and Jim holding hands as they're laughing at the joke, Roy gets so fucking angry, and I love Jim acting like such a coward. It's so funny to me. And when he asks Dwight to back him up, Dwight's like, fuck that shit, because he's already been made to look like an idiot, and responds with this.
I have absolutely no idea.
Michael is such an interesting character to me. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him, and I think he's so interesting to study as a character. There are different layers to Michael that we will learn more about in the following seasons, but season 1 sets the groundwork establishing this middle-aged man-child who wants attention from his coworkers. He views his employees like a family and describes his relationships like they're best friends. A lot of the time his jokes are either racist or sexist or pop culture references,
I still love that after 7 years.
which leads him to making jokes that people around him don't really get or don't find funny.
Look at you. You're like the new and improved Pam. Pam 6.0.
It's clear that Michael has a lot of respect for guys like Jim and especially Ryan, the man that he wishes he could have been at Ryan's age, and his immediate attachment to Ryan becomes evident by how much he sees himself like Ryan, even though they aren't alike at all.
And you ain't gonna be messing with my chillin'.
Michael has very little self-awareness, and this is what leads him to saying offensive shit all the time. He takes jokes too far. He's insensitive and rude, and just can be very unlikable, which is why a lot of people find him very annoying. The way he goes out of his way to get a laugh or a reaction from people is kind of sad at points and even pathetic at times, especially how he acts during the basketball game when he assumes that Stanley will automatically be good at basketball because he's black. So I should probably talk about that, how racism and race jokes are depicted in this show, because I do think at a certain point, the way racist jokes are structured in this show is usually punching down at the ignorant white person and not the person of color, and that's usually what will make the joke, because it's this kind of ironic racism in a way. But later in the show, they started doing something else. Michael's ignorance is even more hilarious when he assumes certain people in the office, for reasons that Michael thinks are obvious, that Phyllis and Kevin wouldn't be good at basketball. Michael becomes more of an interesting and entertaining character, especially as the seasons go on, and it's obvious that his character becomes more cartoonish over time, and I will be going into depth about that as we go through the seasons. What you'll immediately notice is how much more laid back and calm Ryan is compared to the narcissistic, abusive asshole he becomes. At first, he's just the temp hired to come in, someone hoping not to really have to be there that long, get some experience in business, and to get out. Like anyone else, Ryan really just wants to be acknowledged, but also thinks he's somewhat better than everybody there. Ryan was always a confident character, it's just in season 1 it was a lot more toned down and realistic, and not this cartoonish, narcissistic, pretentious type of confidence that he becomes later. Ryan seems to strive for greatness, that's clear, and he also seems to have awareness that Dunder Mifflin is a failing company. He understands things that Michael and even the others in the office don't seem to understand about business that would help the company become a little bit more profitable. All the characters are toned down this season because they're not realized characters, so it is a little weird when you see like a character like Kelly with her notable personality and quirks, who just seems like this regular woman in the office. Then they slowly transform her into this vapid person, obsessed with men, particularly obsessed with Ryan and celebrity culture. Overall, season 1 is a good entry point for the show. There are obviously some hiccups because the characters aren't fully realized yet, and the episodes may seem a little dry in writing, but the second season is really where the show gains its footing, and that's really where we'll see how the writing and the characters start to become more like the characters we know. I hope you enjoyed this season 1 retrospective on The Office. I wasn't quite sure how to structure this, but I think it came out alright. If you made it this far, thank you for watching until the end, and I hope to see you in the next one.
It's called hentai, and it's art.